Welcome to the South Africa Brief podcast. My name is Jonathan Mokes. I'm joined as ever by my colleagues and co-hosts, Paul Berkowitz and Sky Swales. This podcast is produced with the support of the Friedrich Naumann Foundation for Freedom. Hello again, Paul. Hello, Sky. Good to have you back.
Hi, Jonathan.
Good to be back, Jonathan. Second episode.
Yeah, absolutely. This is episode 2 of our 5-part series ahead of the local government elections. We are looking at the state of South Africa's political landscape today, and in particular, the state of the main parties. As you should know by now, there's an accompanying article that goes with us. It's already up on the South Africa Brief Substack, so that's southafricabrief.substack.com. Today, to take us through and help us sort of navigate our understanding of the South African political landscape, and in particular, the state of some of the parties ahead of the local government election, we are delighted to be joined by political analyst and the parliamentary correspondent for the Business Day, Tara Roos. Tara, thank you very, very much for joining us and for making time to contribute to the series.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to delving deeper into the current state of our political environment. It's currently very messy ahead of the upcoming local government elections.
Yeah, certainly, to say the least. So we basically just want to have a free-flowing conversation today, look at where the parties are, who's gaining, who's losing, what we know, what we may not know. But Paul, do you want to kick us off?
Thanks, Jonathan. Yes, and thanks very much, Tara, for joining us. I don't think we mentioned Tara's also the author of a new book.
My bad, yes.
Political Analysis, Where to from here, question mark. And hopefully you'll tell us a little bit more about that, Tara. Okay, so I guess I'm kicking off with the biggest party, the ANC. Tara, our article's quite blunt. We think the ANC could fall even further below 40%, which is the level we were looking at in the 2024 national election. What's your feeling? Where do you put the ANC's performance if you look ahead to November?
The ANC is going to do terribly. Within the exception of Mangaroon, they will be one of the smallest parties in all municipalities. They are not set to be in the top 3 in any municipality currently. And I think when we look at the ANC's decline, it's actually quite devastating. Following 2024, the ANC went after, and I talk about this in the book, the idea of the Tinswalo voter. They gave up on campaigning in urban areas. They said we are going to go to rural areas. We're going to go to places where we gave people water and electricity and basic infrastructure in hoping that that would boost their numbers and they would maintain a 50% majority. That did not happen. And when we look particularly in urban metros today, the ANC is going to do terribly, and it is their own fault. You would think that after 2024, the ANC has learned its lesson, but the ANC has this terrible problem in which they are not honest with themselves. They're not honest about the state of South Africa today, and they're not honest about the role that they have played. And I think until the ANC has that level of honesty and looks internally inside the party, nothing is going to change except the fact that they're going to continue declining. And we see this now even with the ANC for the first time ever opening up its mayoral candidate selection and councillor selection to everyone. They're looking beyond their branches at a local level. And that's an indication that the ANC does not have young talent coming up inside the youth league as they had for many, many years. We look even at a national level, it is the same regurgitated leaders over and over again. The ANC has nothing new to offer the South African public. And that is the ANC's own fault. So they are going to do terribly in the upcoming local government elections. Not to mention, currently they are just littered with scandals when we look at the Madlanga Commission, when we look at the ad hoc committee, when we look about the upcoming Pala inquiry. The ANC cannot seem to catch a break, but it's all because of their own doing.
Wow. Okay. Not pulling any punches, Tara. Maybe we were a bit optimistic when we said that they're only going to lose a little bit compared to 2 years ago.
Thank you, Tara.
Yeah.
Sorry. So it seems that there's a real possibility that the ANC would only send ward councillors, especially in Johannesburg, without any PR councillors at all. Would you like to just talk a little bit about what kind of, how seismic that would be?
I do think, particularly in Johannesburg, the ANC is currently grasping at straws. They have yet to announce a mayoral candidate. The rumors are that it's going to be Frank Chikane. Dada Moreira is out of the race. I do not see simply how Dada Moreira should have been in the race to begin with, given his ultimate decline in the city of Joburg. Joburgers call him the Dad Mayor. When he came in, he said, "Don't expect much change from me," and that's what's happened in the city of Joburg. The difficulty that the ANC faces in Joburg particularly is one, its continued decline, but two, the force that is Helen Zille. Her impact on the Joburg mayoral race has cannot simply be defined. And I think the ANC is really struggling to come up against Helen Zille in a meaningful way. They need someone who is a big name. They need someone who is a clean slate. They need someone who is going to try and revive the ANC in Johannesburg, but I don't think that there is any revival needed because no one seems to be voting for the ANC. People are so tired of the ANC, particularly in Joburg. And by losing Joburg as greatly as they have, really proves the decline of ANC governance. When the ANC lost Cape Town, it was the first indication that the party was going downwards because Cape Town as a city already has the infrastructure and it is just about maintaining it. They lost Cape Town. They then went on to lose the city of Joburg. And, when we look at 2016 up until now, it's been peak coalition era at a local government level, and that is going to continue. But I think for the ANC now only fielding ward councillors, it shows that firstly, they don't have a talent selection pool. Very few people want to sign up to be a counselor for the ANC. And when we look at the demands of being a counselor, the fact that it is quite dangerous at a local government level, looking at areas that you're campaigning at, and just the mere fact that people don't want to work for the ANC, that they do not have enough young talent coming into the party. They do not have the buy-in from the South African public. And they're almost being hurt on two ends of the straw. Because one thing that the ANC has always been strong in is that their base was strong. They had voters that they could return to time and time again, and that base is increasingly shrinking.
So the ANC is definitely on shaky ground, and we've seen in awards such as Soweto, there was a by-election last year, Paul, that you tracked very, very carefully. Getting 34% an award in Soweto is just absolutely devastating. So you've mentioned, Tara, I think quite a lot to kick off with on the subject of the ANC. You mentioned the force that is Helen Zille in Johannesburg, and I think certainly we share a view that unless something dramatically different happens between now and the election, she looks odds on to at least lead the DA to becoming the biggest party in the city of Johannesburg. The DA also looks likely as things stand, but it'd be great to get your view on this, that it's on track, obviously, to win its fourth outright majority in the city of Cape Town. Just taking maybe a bit of a macro view of the DA, they've obviously didn't grow that much in election 2024. I suppose their big success, as they portray it, is getting landed in the government of national unity, and they've done a fairly interesting job of still sort of maintaining or threading the needle in the government of national unity by being opposition, but at the same time attempting to sort of showcase how they've performed. What do you think's working well for them, and what should they be worried about going into November?
Helen Zille's candidacy, despite being well received, is also a very scary indicator for the DA. The fact that they have been the second largest party in the city of Joburg, and they have about 70, I think it's 73 councillors in the city council already, who have been serving and working in the city of Joburg, none of whom have been able to make, despite 30 years of ANC degradation and quite frankly running the city of Joburg into the ground, they haven't been able to make a case for the DA to be the alternative. So much so, they had to get one of the most popular politicians in the country, importer from the city of Cape Town into Joburg at 73 years old. It's an indictment on the DA leadership in Gauteng as a whole. And we see that from their performance in 2024, where they were not able to move the needle in Gauteng at a provincial level and largely at a national level as well. Despite the ANC falling in 2024 below 50, the DA wasn't able to pick up a single vote. They lost almost 100,000 votes going from 2019 into 2024. They've lost almost 600,000 votes going from 2014 into 2024. The DA is not growing, and that is a fundamental problem that they're facing. And the fact that Helen Zille will be the largest party is a win, but she will not get 50+1. And that is the DA's ultimate dilemma. And I mean, we see this now with increasing resources being put into their campaign. Just this past week, there were these 10 DA branded buckies taking the streets of Joburg, and they're cleaning up Joburg, and they're cleaning up parks, and they're doing a lot of these initiatives. There is big money being put behind Helen's campaign. And for her not to get 50+1 is going to be a dramatic fall for the DA. My very controversial opinion, Jonathan, and I was dragged on the internet for saying this, is that I don't think the DA is going to retain the majority in the city of Cape Town.
Wow.
I could be very wrong about this. And, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I think that I am increasingly right. This opinion does not come out of nowhere. The DA only holds the majority by 8%. 8% is not a lot. And I have been to about 40 now Ratepayers Association meetings in and around the city. I've written articles about it for the Business Day, and people are upset with John Neil Lewis. And it's not that I think parties are going to grow dramatically in the city of Cape Town, within the exception of the Patriotic Alliance and perhaps Action SA. But the DA base is not going to turn out for them. There is a myriad of issues that the city of Cape Town is currently facing. And the reality is that we have a part-time mayor. And the DA can't escape that. You cannot say that the city of Cape Town is your priority when Jordan Hill Lewis has openly said that his priority is to grow the DA to make it the second largest party. He is not in the city half the time. And with the scandals coming out, I mean, the AG report, then the public protector report, the fact that there's no clean audits, these mounting issues coming up, people are drastically upset about the increasing cost of living in the city. And when we look at DA supporter bases, particularly in the suburbs, the sentiment that I have gotten is that people are upset about rate-based property valuations and how that is drastically increasing the rates and taxes. I mean, the story that I did very recently, I was in the Constantia Hills, our Ratepayers Association meetings, and I spoke to 20 different residents, all DA voters. I mean, that is a area that has about a 90% DA support base. 90% of all residents vote for the DA. And all 20 of them told me that they're not voting for the DA anymore. Out of those 20, 18 said they're not voting at all. And that is what is going to happen. People are not going to turn out in this election. I could be wrong. The DA could grow, but I feel pretty certain about this when we look at the way the PA has been campaigning and how well the PA has been doing. We look at Saldanha, we look at Stellenbosch, we look at George. Granted, a by-election is a very different and particular environment to a local government election, and I can acknowledge that. But I think that there is a sentiment that people are drastically upset with John Neil Lewis. Just last week, he launched this initiative about how Metro Police are now going to have detectives at a local level. And he said at this engagement, when you vote for me on November 4th, November 5th, this is going to happen. Firstly, he doesn't have the authority to do that. That is a national competency. And secondly, you're the mayor now. So why not enact this change now? And this is the sentiment in Cape Town. People are increasingly getting very frustrated with the influx of digital nomads, with tourists coming into the city, with the increasing cost of living crisis. And it's taking a toll on just basic service delivery. If I can share my perspective, I live on the Atlantic seaboard. I stay in Greenpoint. And there are constructions going up every single day. It is taking a toll. I mean, sewage is flowing through the streets because there is so many people packed into a small space, and it is taking a toll on the infrastructure. And these are things that residents are concerned about and residents are seeing. This is very dependent on how well the PA is able to campaign. They haven't announced a mayoral candidate yet. Maybe perhaps they're saving their energy. The DA has started quite early, which has given them an advantage. But I feel very certain, in my opinion, that I think they're going to lose their majority.
Thanks, Tara. That's actually what I was going to ask you, was just about the vulnerability of the DA, in particularly the rural parts of the Western Cape, and I guess also the western parts of the Eastern Cape. and just how much of an impact you think that the PA could make, maybe particularly in coloured townships, I mean, in Cape Town. I don't know if you have
The
any.
PA, yeah, the PA has been doing incredibly well, particularly in the Western Cape, the Eastern Cape, and the Northern Cape. Those are the three biggest zones that they are increasing their voter base. And what Gaten McKenzie is doing particularly well is Gaten McKenzie is a populist politician, and he's never hid that about himself. But what Gaten McKenzie is doing, he's going to colored voters and saying, look at how high death is in the colored community. Look at the impacts of gang violence. Look at the impacts of drugs. No one has been able to address this problem because they are not colored. I, as a colored man, only understand the vulnerabilities that you are going through. No one understands what you are going through. You are the most oppressed group. You are the most vulnerable group in South Africa. Vote for me, and I will change this. That completely discard, and it's this populist narrative is something that many people are using. That's what AfriForum will tell you, that the white farmer is the most oppressed in South Africa. But this completely disregards the fact that 70 people are killed a day, and all of this really goes back to the ANC. The ANC's inability to govern at a national level has led to the rise of hyperfragmentation in our political landscape, but also to the rise of populist politicians and populist movements. Because if the ANC had governed properly, we wouldn't really be dealing with any of these issues. But I think that Gayton McKenzie is going to do very, very well. The difficulty that the party is facing, I'm speaking about the Patriotic Alliance here, is that they don't have a figure outside of Kate McKenzie.
No.
We had the likes of Ashley Souls, Marlon Daniels in Parliament. They had Liam Jacobs for a short while. But Gayton, what he needs to do to be tactically smart is to build up more
Yeah.
leaders like him, because he can't be everywhere all at once. And that's a big difficulty that the PA faces if they truly want to grow at a national level and at a local level. They need to find more leaders because they have foot soldiers, they have volunteers. This is very evident in the way in which they're growing, but they don't have other voices besides Gayton, and they don't have anyone who has the command strength of Gayton to mobilize individuals. And that is a big thing that the party needs if they want to grow.
Yeah, I think you've made well. Firstly, your point in Cape Town is really really fascinating, and I mean I certainly would agree with you that the DA won't grow in the city of Cape Town. I think what's going to be fascinating is what is the quality of the opposition. Obviously, we've been speaking about the PA and what is the impact of that low turnout. You may have a kind of ANC scenario affecting the DA or starting to begin in Cape Town. Maybe just because I know Paul wants to talk about MK and move to the Kingdom of the Zulu shortly, but before we do that, just maybe a final point on the PA. I mean, I think you're absolutely right on Gayton. He's the only person. There's a lack of leadership depth there. Their operational ability, certainly in by-elections, has been something to behold, and you can also see that by the sort of bucking of the trend of turnout in by-elections, where the PA contests sort of local government by-elections are sort of hitting 50%, 55%, sometimes exceeding what happened in the 2021 local government election. Do you think, though, in a local government election day, the 4th of November, where you are contesting multiple municipalities, multiple wards across the country, that the PA has the organizational strength to sustain that kind of ability in multiple places at the same time?
That ultimately comes down to money. I'm not sure what Gate McKenzie's current status is, but in 2024, the PA received a lot of donor funding. And that was really how they were able to mobilize on the ground and get people out, and why they did so well. I mean, the PA was one of the few parties out of the smaller ones that were contesting the national election for the first time that did really well. Um, I don't think anyone expected them to get 9 seats in parliament.
No.
And the difficulty is now is, do they have the operational forces on the ground? Because they could mobilize in a by-election. When it comes to a local government election, I I I tend to say that I would like to think so.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm giving the PA too much credit, looking at how they mobilize when it comes to by-elections. But I think that Gayton McKenzie himself is determined to unseat the DA. And I think he will do whatever is necessary to make sure that that happens. The PA right now, when we look at their look at them in the city of Cape Town, they're sitting around 8%. If the PA could grow to 20, maybe 25%, that would be a massive growth for them in the city. And it would launch a major blow to the DA as a whole. And so I think that is where Gate McKenzie is currently setting his eyes. And I think that it's an achievable goal. Whether or not they have the operational strength internally, I'm unsure about.
Okay, fascinating.
Yeah. It's a funny thing, before we get
Yeah.
into the next question, as a long-suffering Johannesburg resident, that it's one thing when we commiserate amongst ourselves, Sky, and we say, oh, you know, it's tough. But to hear, I think particularly, Tara, not your fault, I think to hear someone from Cape Town sympathize and even pity us, it hits in a different way. Yeah, it's not easy. But again, Tara, not your fault. Okay, onto MK, the third largest party now. Okay, so there've been very few polls recently, Tara, but the ones that have come out seem to reinforce the picture that we have of MK in eThekwini, in the metro, and in the rest of KwaZulu-Natal province. The polls are echoing what we saw in the 2024 election. So some polls have MK at just under 50% in the metro. Some of them, recent ones, have MK in the mid-50s with a very clear, healthy majority. And we've seen the green juggernaut just roll over the whole province. We know outside of Durban there's going to be some interesting changes across the rest of the province as well. But we've never seen a party that's done so well electorally and then just in the day-to-day running of things just, you know, fall apart like a tissue in the washing machine. So I guess my question is, can the party hold things together? Are these two forces really equally competing forces, or will MK manage to overcome all of the chaos that's going on internally, the whole mess of the circus, and just continue to do well and maintain its results?
In the upcoming local government election, MK will do well. They will do very well in KZN. I also think that not a lot of people are talking about them in Johannesburg, and I think that they will be a major player in the city of Joburg. But long term, MK is doomed to fail. I talk about this in my book. MK will eventually fail because the glue that is holding them together is Jacob Zuma. Jacob Zuma is a very old man. And when Jacob Zuma's time comes, they do not have the operational skills, the organizational skills, the political will to keep MK together. There will be so much infighting that occurs that the party will just decimate. And MK has proven that they do not have the ability to govern themselves internally. There is a rotating door of members of parliament. Covering parliament, I can tell you that out of all of the sittings of the National Assembly, there has never been one where all MK MPs are fully present. They're the official opposition in parliament, and they've never been fully sat for one sitting in the National Assembly. And so, when we look at things like that, when we look at the rotating door of leaders, when we look at just the infighting, I mean, with Duduzile Zuma, the former spokesperson, now also taking them being evicted out of the party on review, and just the constant battles that they're facing in terms of legality, and the scandals. I mean, their former chief whip was arrested and pressed with criminal charges because she was charging MPs to be members of parliament. They had to pay her 10,000 Rand a month, and that money was reportedly going to the maintenance of Nkandla. The party is not serious in the manner in which they're governing. But the reason why I think MK is doing so well is because MK voters are disenfranchised ANC voters. The difficulty in South Africa is that people like the ANC. The ANC is the political center of this country, not just because of the role that they played in their liberation, but people like ANC policies. They like that the ANC is centrist. They like that the fact that they're, more progressive when it comes to social welfare. They still, toe the line when it comes to privatization. People like BE, people like NHI. What South Africans have a problem with is the ANC's execution. They don't like the ANC's execution. And we see this in the fact that no other party has been able to come even close to the ANC, despite them falling in 2024. They're almost double the size of the DA in terms of electoral votes on a national level. And we have to ask ourselves why that is. Why, after 30 years of the ANC being so corrupt, hollowing out state institutions, making a mockery of themselves on the political stage, do South Africans still vote for them? It's because South Africans see no other alternative. And the fact that no other party has been able to make that alternative is an indication that people still want the ANC. And what NK has very smartly done is that they've said, we will take you back. We will return the ANC and be the ANC of its former glory. And that's why NK did so well in 2024. There were people who were going to the polls thinking and saying, I'm going to vote for the ANC, that's Zuma's party, because they believe that Jacob Zuma is going to restore this country and restore the ANC. And the thing that Jacob Zuma benefits the most from is nostalgia. People, when they think about the Zuma years, they think about the fact that the cost of living was lower, that petrol was lower, that the rand was stronger to the dollar. They don't think of state capture being the first and the foremost thing in their mind. Because cost of living has gotten so high and crime has increased so drastically in South Africa, those are the things that South Africans measure the country by. South Africans are not looking at the GDP rate. They're looking at their day-to-day living. And for them, day-to-day living was better under Jacob Zuma. Granted, Jacob Zuma heavily benefited from the fact that he ruled on Thabo Mbeki's economy, and we are now living in the reality of Jacob Zuma's economy today. But South Africans don't think about that. They think about their day-to-day lives. And that's what MK has done so well and what they will continue to do so well as we see the ANC decline.
Yeah, last week's podcast, we were actually talking about the fact that MK is in effect an ANC party. Obviously, it's an ANC breakaway. It's almost like an external faction of the ANC now. And one of, I thought, the very clever political messaging that they used online in 2024 was talking about Ramaphosa's ANC, as you've just said, contrasted with Zuma's ANC and the sort of ANC of yesteryear. So, very, very effective. Let's talk about another ANC breakaway, and that is the EFF. And maybe sticking, they were obviously completely wiped out in KZN if we continue on from KZN. But it does seem that, the EFF suffered a slight decline in the 2024 election. They suffered an exodus of leaders, suffered some defections to MK, and also people just leaving politics like Ndlozi. They seem to have lost quite a bit of steam. They also probably tainted a bit now by having been in government in places like Ekurhuleni. They're obviously now part of the Gauteng GPU. And then, of course, Julius Malema himself is embroiled in this conviction issue in Buffalo City. Do you think 2024 was the beginning of the end for them?
I do. The difficulty with the EFF is firstly, South Africans are not revolutionary people. South Africans are centrists. They don't really buy into this idea of policies that the EFF is selling. The majority of EFF voters are younger South Africans. The EFF does incredibly well, particularly at universities, and they do really well at university SRCs because of the way that they have been able to capture residents in the residencies of these universities. And by establishing these student commands, that's how they get people into the party and they bring them up in the ranks. But that doesn't translate on a national level because students leave university and they might still be members of the EFF, but then they get jobs and they want to buy homes and they look at the realities of everyday life and they're like, actually, I can't really be down with the revolution like I used to when I was in university. The difficulty the EFF faces is that when we look at its top leadership, they're all academics. They studied Marxism and Leninism. That is not the ordinary, everyday South African. And so while some of the EFF's policies might be appealing, they actually haven't done the real work at a ground level to explain to South Africans what they truly mean by their policies. Because many South Africans want land expropriation, but the EFF hasn't actually explained how that translates. And the difficulty that they face now is that they haven't been able to bring their revolutionary policies into governing. When we look at Ekurhuleni and the mess that they've created with their MSc of Finance, being ousted out of the city and now being back at the provincial legislature, they've created quite a mess and they haven't truly been able to translate their policies into action. And that is what the South African public judges you by. And the EFF's biggest missed opportunity is actually capitalizing on young, working class Black voters. The fact that they have not been able to capture that market speaks to the ANC's increasing decline. Similarly to MK, they do face this problem of what happens beyond Julius Malema. There are many leaders inside the EFF. When we look in Parliament, we look at Leanne Matthys, we look at Sihle Lonzi, we look at Sanaa Tambo. There are many, many people who are prominent figures inside the EFF, but they're not nearly as close to the level and have the level of influence as Julius Malema. And so that is the difficulty that the EFF faces currently. And the EFF does have a ceiling. It is very unlikely that the EFF will ever come close to being the largest party in South Africa. And that is just because of the politics of South African people. And they need to find a way to break through that ceiling.
Yeah. So we've had a bit of a KZN theme because we started the EFF question with KZN, and the Sky's from KZN, so there's a strong bias here, and I know she wants to ask about the IFP.
Yeah. So we've seen the IFP navigate, past the death of Buthelezi, also where it is now in the KwaZulu-Natal GPU and also in the GNU, and they also seem to be winning some by-elections. So do you think that the IFP will be able to just continue ticking on? What is the threat also that the IFP maybe faces from the MK in KZN?
When we look at KZN currently, the IFP in 2024 made a regional comeback. They gained some ground back in 2024. The difficulty with the IFP, like the EFF, is that they have a ceiling. The IFP can only ever win so many votes because they have branded themselves as a Zulu party. And the difficulty with now MK in having a Zulu leader, MK is not a Zulu party. They use Zulu nationalism as a theme to galvanize their base. But MK is a party that is trying to appeal to broadly South Africans, whereas the IFP is only looking for a particular segment of, the voting pie. And MK poses a real challenge to the IFP, particularly for those who feel that the IFP hasn't actually been a credible alternative to the ANC. And that is the difficulty, is that you get many voters who would consider voting for the IFP, but they don't want to vote for someone who is in government because they feel as if the IFP is playing second fiddle to the ANC. And I think that the IFP will make inroads in KZN in particular when we are looking at the metros in KZN. And I think that when we look currently in the provincial coalition that they have, the IFP has actually been doing very well. And I think that they will use that to their advantage when they're campaigning in this upcoming local government election.
Okay.
So shifting maybe back up to Gauteng, or a Gauteng-oriented party, they would probably get upset with me for calling them this, but let's talk a bit about Action SA. Because I think without question, and I'm sure you've referred to this before, that Action SA, by their standards, had a very disappointing 2024 election.
Yeah.
And I think they got completely suckered into the pre-election coalition with the DA.
Yeah.
They got squeezed. I was very interested by their acquisition of Forum for Service Delivery, and then it seemed like towards the end of last year they had a sort of strategic shift where they were looking at a sort of township, almost a peri-urban strategy. There was a by-election win in the northwest. They did quite well in the south of Gauteng, and that seemed to be actually potentially quite a sweet spot for them. However, I mean, with Herman Mashaba now running in Johannesburg, they seem to be sort of contesting a bit in DA territory, and they seem to be floundering a bit again. Is that fair? What's your sort of perspective on how they're tracking at the moment?
I think that is a very fair perspective. The difficulty with a lot of these smaller parties is that they don't have branches. They don't have branches at a local level. And with a lot of these new age parties, they try to come in and they try to say, we're going to do things differently and we're going to rewrite the book, and we don't want to play traditional politics. But South Africa has a very set and clear set of rules that if you want to be a party that does well electorally, you need to have branches, you need to have volunteers on a local level, those need to go up to a national level. There are certain sets of criteria, and I think Action SA learned that lesson in 2024. With Herman Mashaba's candidacy, they're really trying to play on nostalgia to the Joburg voter to say, do you remember 2016? Do you remember what Mashaba did? We could bring that back. And I think that nostalgia is going to work for some people, particularly those who simply do not want to vote for Helen Zille. Action SA is a very credible alternative to them. I also think Action SA choosing not to join the government of national unity was a very tactical move. Because they criticized the GNU on absolutely everything. And that has played very well for them, particularly at a local level, for many voters who feel that what we're experiencing now at a national level with the GNU is just simply a continuation of ANC rule. And those who feel that their life has actually gotten worse under the government of national unity. And I think that is a tactic that Action SA is doing particularly well. I think you're very right to call them a Gauteng-based and centered party. With Daryline James now being their Cape Town mayoral candidate, I do think they're trying to make some inroads. Daryline has a very interesting campaign strategy. She has been going with police to do drug raids. She is really trying to target the colored voter, particularly the colored mother. I think that she will do particularly well. Daryline has built a very strong public image. After serving on the ad hoc committee, she has gone quite viral for her interrogation of witnesses. And she has a very interesting personal life story. She openly talks about the fact that her son was a drug addict, how she had to overcome that, her difficulties with getting help from the state when looking at social workers, looking at the police, and how she as a mother was unable and failed by the state. And that is a story that resonates with many colored mothers, particularly in the Western Cape. And it's something that is going to play very well for her. And actually say will attract, many voters, disenfranchised DA voters and discouraged DA voters, and many voters who are sitting at home because they found no alternative, and many voters who simply don't want to vote for the Patriotic Alliance. And so I think she will do well, but it again comes down to their ability to build branches at a local level and to effectively campaign. It is very easy to do well in certain communities where you're already well known as a figure. But in communities where she is unknown and she doesn't have the time to knock on every single door, I mean, the clock is running out to the November 4th. And I think the biggest determinant is how well they're able to mobilize their ground forces, because that is ultimately the test of every party in the upcoming election.
All right. How many medium-sized parties do we have left? Well, moving from Action SA to the Freedom Front Plus, Tara, the FF Plus has been described as facing an existential contest. Let's go back one election cycle. Obviously, the biggest story out of 2019 national provincial election was the Freedom Front Plus taking a bite of a couple of 100,000, 400,000?
300,000, I think it was.
300 and change out of the DA's hide. The DA winning some of them back, but I think the majority probably being lost to voters exiting the system, apathy. All right. So we know that the DA historically has been very good at squeezing smaller parties, and it will definitely want to squeeze the Freedom Front Plus. Does the Freedom Front Plus have a route back? And bearing in mind, we're looking at probably very specific geographies. Does the Freedom Front Plus remain a player, let's say, in Tshwane? Does it win those head-to-head contests in those wards in the Northwest and Limpopo, where it's essentially those two parties? How do you see it?
The Freedom Front Plus, similarly to the IFP, because of the branding of their party, they do have a ceiling. There is a limit on how well they can do. But the Freedom Front Plus, unlike the IFP, I think I would argue, has the ability to make the argument of being a national party. But it's just in terms of their messaging and how they put themselves forward. I think that they've done a very and made a very smart decision to have Patriotic stay inside the GNU and be a minister, but have Corne Mulder as leader be outside. Because the Freedom Front Plus has been able to separate themselves from the GNU in a manner that I don't think the DA has. Granted, they only have one ministry and they're much smaller. But when it comes to issues like BE and Bella and NHI, the Freedom Front Plus has been able to really carve out their stance and political identity separate from the fact that they're actually still a part of the GNU and governing and such. And I think even more so in the tone, covering Parliament very closely, I listen to these leaders talk all of the time, and Corne Mulder is much more direct than we previously saw John Steenhuisen, or now that we currently see Jordan Neal Lewis, in what they think as a party and where they stand on these very key governance issues. And what I think the litmus test of the Freedom Front Plus in this next election will be is how do they break beyond the Afrikaner voter, the traditional Afrikaner speaking voter? How do they say and translate to say, when we talk about the Afrikaner national identity, we actually mean that as an ethos and something that you subscribe to, that you don't have to be someone who speaks Afrikaans in terms of a political identity. And that's what they're trying to transform it into. I do think that when we look at how devastating foot and mouth has been on the agricultural industry and John Steenhuisen's handling of that and his subsequent removal, I do think that the DA has come to terms with the fact that they've lost the political narrative on foot and mouth. And that is a very key voting base for the DA. We see with Willie Okamp now being replacing John Steenhuisen as minister, they're trying to win that political narrative. And I do think that the Freedom Front Plus will make small inroads in the upcoming local government election.
So, Tara, just to pull all of this together, if you had to name what you think the big structural shift could be since 2024, what do you think that is?
I think the thing that is going to define this next election is that actually doesn't matter on a local level. I think that power is going to be negotiated nationally. It is going to be parties coming together to say, I will vote for you in the city of Joburg, you vote for us in eThekwini, we will vote for you in Ekurhuleni, we'll give you our votes in the city of Cape Town. That is what is going to happen at a national level. And that makes it very difficult for parties who are unable to build coalitions. When we look at pre-existing government of provincial unity coalitions, those are very different from what is happening at a national level and the GNU. And it doesn't mean that the GNU is going to work together. In fact, many parties are campaigning against their GNU partners at a local level. And so I think we're in for a very interesting time. Coalitions are undoubtedly the future of local government election politics. And I think we will see a coalition in almost every major metro in this upcoming local government election.
Yeah. Thanks, Tara. And maybe just before we wrap up, I mean, you've mentioned something that for many people might be a little bit unpredictable, which is Cape Town. But I mean, outside of Cape Town, are there any other surprises that you think might strike the South Africans when they sort of wake up on the 5th or the 6th of November when results come out?
I don't think Helen Zille will become mayor. I apologize to the mini Joburgers who think she will be. She's unable to build a coalition. Helen Zille's only true path to power is through the Patriotic Alliance in the city of Joburg, and she does not want to get into bed with Gayton. Similarly, Gayton doesn't want to get into bed with Helen. And I think when we look, particularly in the city of Joburg, power inside the ANC in Gauteng and in Joburg is dictated through Panyaza Lesufi. Panyaza Lesufi would rather set himself on fire than watch Helen Zille become the mayor. And he has openly said this multiple times. He will do anything in his power to stop Helen Zille. And so she will be the largest party. That is no doubt. She will get the most votes. But I don't think that she will become the mayor. The ANC, I think, will lose in every single metro. I don't think the ANC will be able to cobble together a majority within the exception of Mangaung. I mean, even then, I think they're holding on very, very, very slimly. And I think, when we look at the current landscape, I think small parties are going to win. I think it is really going to be these small parties who are going to be kingmakers, because they are an alternative. If of three, four parties come together to say, who gets to be the mayor, people don't want the ANC. And I think the ANC knows in themselves that people don't want them to hold the mayorship at a local government level. And having a small party come in and having them hold the mayorship is something that does seem to be preferable to the ANC when we look at the likes of Al Jamar governing in the city of Joburg. And so I think that's really what's going to define this upcoming local government election.
So you're going to have a few Joburgers feeling very, very depressed after hearing that.
No, I'm not this job. Let's not get too personal. I don't mind who's in charge as long as it works.
Yeah.
I would rather not see an ANC or an ANC proxy, but okay. I'm not necessarily representative or indicative of the Joburg voter. Personal preferences do not constitute predictive advice. Terms and conditions apply.
Yeah.
Well, Tara, I mean, in closing, that was a brilliant whirlwind tour. I think so much time has passed so quickly. We probably could have gone through all 18 parties in the GNU and another few dozen municipalities, but we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you very much, Tara. That was an absolute tour de force. So, listeners, this is the second of a series of 5 episodes. As mentioned at the top, we have an accompanying article to this that you can read. Also, do check out Tara's book, Where to From Here, which question mark, as Paul always reminds me, where to from here question mark, which will match, I think, in a longer form, the great insights that Tara has shared with us. Next week, we will be back with a discussion on the Metro Battlegrounds, but looking in a lot of detail at the numbers with Davy Scholz, which will be a lot of fun. So looking forward to that. But until next time, thank you very much, and we'll see you soon.